so you know, you can actually do this with the tape measure, or you can just estimate. I like to be further away than a lot of people. I think it just makes it easier to see what you're doing. You don't want to be up like this. You want to be at least, so let's say our subject is from here to about here. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, about 11 squares. 11 times 2 is 22, all right? So 22 inches would be once, 44 would be twice, and then another 11 makes 53, is that right? 55, I'm sorry. Okay, so let's have a look and see how far that is. It's about that far. So I'm going to want to be about this far away, okay? Which is about where I was standing. So I'm going to want to be about this far from my subject, okay? Now, the other thing that you have to keep in mind whenever you're using a grid is the concept of perpendicularity, okay? And the way to remember this is this. You have to think of the grid as at 90 degrees to your line of sight. Okay? So that when I'm looking at you right now, I'm looking through an imaginary window like this, and if I were to look up there, that imaginary window has to move with me like this. Okay? If I'm looking down, it has to move with me like this. So since we're looking straight on at this grid, I have to always imagine my line of sight, and this surface, which is sort of like a plane, a picture plane, has to be perpendicular to my line of sight. Now this seems obvious, but a lot of people, when they start drawing with the grid, they'll set the easel up and they'll start looking over from this side over here. Okay? Or they'll be slightly, this won't be completely level from front to back. And as a result, the line of sight is not perpendicular to the grid. The grid might be tipped, or if they're over here, they're not looking at a right angle either. At 90 degrees. So always maintain that perpendicularity, big word I know, but keep that in mind that you have to have that for this to work. Otherwise you're not looking through squares anymore, you're looking through a distorted square. When you've determined where you're going to be, when you make your drawing or where you make your painting, you should mark the ground where you're standing, and that means that's where my feet go, or that's where my chair legs go, so that you go back to the same spot every time, okay? So I'm going to do that right now with some tape. I'm going to be standing right about here, and so I'm just going to go down here on the ground, and I'm going to set up some masking tape, so that when I go to make my drawing, my toes are going to be just touching the edge of this tape over here. Okay, you might want to do a still of that. Mm-hmm. Okay, my toes will be just behind this tape. All right? So, if I'm right here, and I'm looking here, I'm looking and I'm seeing, you know, I kind of like the way this front edge comes down, and I like that amount of space from about this line to about right here. So I'm going to go ahead and put a line marker for now here. Let me have a look again. And I think maybe right about here. Okay. And now I can look and say, well, how much room do I want? How much room do I want on the top of the design? So I'm looking, and I think I want about. I think I want about to this line right here. And obviously, this is a rectangle, so this has to do here. They go right on there, and here. Okay, now at this point, I have 4 points, so I've got my canvas or drawing shape all ready to go. Okay, it's pretty clear what I want it to be. It's pretty simple. I also now know what my stretcher bar size is going to be. So let's count: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So that's 8 times 2 is 16. So I've got a 16-inch stretcher bar here, and then I've got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 24-inch stretcher bar going that way. I've got a 16 by 24 canvas size. Okay? So my next step is to set up my plumb, and the plumb is going to be my final determiner of where I'm going to be standing. So let's get out that measure bar now. The plumb bar. Okay. We're going to undo this. Now remember I told you about that groove on the back. I'm putting that in that groove. I'm just bending it down to the front. Now notice that little bit of new tension is going to throw the grid slightly off level. So what you have to do is you have to go back to your tripod and make sure that you are plumb again. That was pretty good. All right. Now, this line here is going to correspond to a very, very important principle, and that's called your line of sight. Remember we were talking about how the grid has to be perpendicular to your line of sight? What we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking this line and deciding that that is going to be where my one eye is going to be looking. When I close one eye and look through, I'm going to be lining up this plumb line here with one of the strings here. And that point is going to be called my home base. All right? It's the line of sight, that's true, but I like to call it the home base because when you're drawing and when you're working on a painting, you want to be able to return your body and your eye, your vision, back to that home base before you start drawing other marks. Okay? So I'm going to set that there. First, I got to wait for it to stop swinging. I'm coming back to my spot. I'm looking down the middle. Okay? You don't want this to be way off to one side. You want it more or less in the middle. It can be a little bit off of center. It doesn't matter. But you can very easily just, as a rule, have it in the center string, and that's good. Okay, I'm looking. My two strings are lining up. This is also a great way, and actually with the plumb, it's a great way to check to see if your grid is level as well, because if your grid is tipped this way, the plumb will definitely tell you. Okay, that's what a plumb's for. I'm looking through. Now I'm going to be doing something else that's very important. I'm going to be taking two line markers, okay, and I'm going to be attaching them to the plumb line. Why am I doing this? Well, do you remember in our Dürer illustration, do you remember this? If you look carefully, you'll see that our artist who's drawing the model through this grid has next to his face and next to his nose what looks like a little obelisk. This is called a gnomon. I'm not exactly sure why, but someone told me that's what it's called. And this gnomon is a thing that the artist would constantly be returning to so that he didn't get shifted this way or that way when he was looking through the grid. Because obviously if you shift this way or that way, the drawing inside of the squares is going to shift as well, and you'll get an inaccurate reading. So as a result, he's got that little obelisk up next to his face. Okay? Now, I knew a person once who set up a tripod and rested his chin on the top of the tripod, and I'm imagining all kinds of contraptions people have used, clamping their head inside of some giant thing so that they don't move. I don't find that much fun, and also, I don't find it particularly useful because it just feels like you're not drawing anymore. I don't know, it's a little bit too constricting. So here is our solution. You take two of these line markers and you attach them to your plumb line. One here. And one here, okay? And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be lining up 2 points on the grid that will determine where you are in space based on their relationship from the plumb line to your line of sight back there on the grid. Sounds complicated, but a little drawing is worth 1,000 words, so I'm going to show you that in just a second.